To talk more about the Trump-Putin meeting, we're joined by our correspondent, Nick Harper. Nick, a very good evening to you. I mean, we saw Trump exiting his Air Force One to meet his Russian counterpart on a red carpet. I suppose as this meeting gets underway, the stakes are high. What are the expectations?
Yeah, plenty of photo opportunities so far. What's not clear is exactly what will come out of the whole of this meeting. We've seen the two leaders together shaking hands, but also at the start of the meeting, taking their seats surrounded by a couple of aides ahead of that planned one-on-one meeting that was then expanded to be a 3-on-3 meeting so that they had aides in the room alongside them as well. Interesting that they were sitting underneath a sign which seems to be the theme for this summit, which is pursuing peace. And in many ways, that is really the central question to all of this unfolding in Alaska. But in advance of the summit, the White House really had been downplaying expectations. They have been saying that Donald Trump has been prepared, that he is optimistic. He himself has sounded bullish. But at the same time, Donald Trump was saying there was a 25% chance that essentially the summit could come to nothing. And that is part of this. Really, the White House saying that this is a listening exercise, a chance for the two leaders to finally meet after 6 years. And Donald Trump said that really his end goal would be to arrange that trilateral meeting. He didn't want to negotiate territorial claims on behalf of Ukraine, with Ukraine not being at the table. Rather, he said, this was all about trying to have a one-on-one with President Putin, but the end goal was to get all three leaders, Trump, Putin and Zelensky, around a negotiating table at some point in the future. What's not clear is if that will be agreed out of the end of this. Yep. We're certainly not expecting to see a full-scale ceasefire. Expectations for that had already been downplayed. We had a few reporters shouting questions to both leaders at the start of their meeting whether a ceasefire could happen. Interesting to note, neither leader decided to answer those direct questions.
So in a build-up to this meeting, I mean, US President Donald Trump has had a lot of conversations with reporters in terms of charting a way forward to, iron out some of the concerns he's got and some of the high hopes that he's hoping on. But we've also seen some reaction from Americans saying that they don't expect much out of these talks.
Well, that's it. I mean, there are a few different elements at play here, but certainly from an American point of view, they don't really feel, at least some of the Americans that have been speaking this week, that the US President, Donald Trump, is the man to try and negotiate peace. There is a real fear amongst some critics of Donald Trump, but also from European leaders and from President Zelensky himself, that Donald Trump quite simply does not have Ukraine's best interests at heart, that he is going into this meeting one-on-one with President Putin to try and carve up Ukrainian territory, to give much of it away, territory that Russia has seized over the last 3.5 years. And I think that's partly why we've seen during the course of this week a real media tour in Europe, with President Zelensky visiting Germany's Chancellor, the UK Prime Minister, over a couple of days. President Zelensky being seen with those European leaders, really to try and stand firm and say, look, these are Ukraine's red lines. We do not intend to cede territory, and we are concerned that the US President could potentially be talking about that. So I think there has been that fear, that concern in America, but also in Europe. But the bottom line is that there isn't really a huge expectation that out the back of this meeting we will see really much progress towards what many sides seem to want, and that is an ultimate peace deal that allows that 3.5-year conflict to come to an end.
What about the other issues, the other practical concerns, with Ukraine calling for the release of all prisoners of war alongside an initial ceasefire?
Yeah, very difficult to try and achieve that. I mean, part of the problem is there doesn't seem to be a vast amount of goodwill on the Russian side to achieve many of the things that Ukraine wants, whether it's a prisoner swap, whether it's handing back territory, whether it's stepping aside and allowing Ukraine to join NATO. Those are all things that Russia says are its red line. It doesn't want to see any of those things, and it certainly doesn't want to hand back any of the territory it has seized. There is some hope that if there are small-scale wins, we could see prisoner exchanges ahead of a complete ceasefire, but really doing that package as an all-in-one. All prisoners released, a ceasefire, and the handing back of territory. There is really no expectation that we would see a package with a ribbon on top that allows Ukraine to get all of those things, all of the things that it wants.
Very well. Nick Harper, SABC News correspondent, giving us the very latest as the US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin meet for a peace summit, one that we will be monitoring very closely.